With a diverse and constantly functional and robust economy, India currently finds itself with the enviable position of being the world's fastest-growing big economy. This occurred as it spent the last 10 years overcoming the likes of Brazil, Canada, Italy, Russia, France, and the UK as it rose from number 11 in the rankings to number 5. As much of a feat that is, it's a testament to the will and cohesion of the southeastern nation in that it seems like this is only the beginning of the rise of this nation. Before long, it is even estimated that India may overtake Germany, India, and Japan in the rankings, with some believing that this could take place before the end of the decade. Even China at number 2 is within range, and if truly India achieves the accomplishment of taking the third position, it would be left for China and India to battle for the distinction of being Asia's largest economy before long. For those looking for what could have sparked this accelerated growth in India's economy, they can turn their direction to the comprehensive economic reforms of liberalization, privatization, and globalization that were put in place back in 1991. That being said, as fast-paced as this growth may seem, the speed of the economic growth is still currently outmatched by that of China, perhaps primarily because China implemented its own similar economic reforms a little more than a decade earlier than India implemented its own policies back in 1978. This is probably why the World Bank data shows that China's GDP, especially when it came to parity and purchasing power, began to overtake India's back in 1991, just when India began to implement its own economically friendly policies, and ever since then, the gap between the two countries have continued to grow wider since then. However, as we come to terms with the end of open globalization, the period of time in which China was able to exploit its intense industrialization to help boost its economy, we find that it is only a matter of time in which China will be overtaken by India, albeit towards the latter years of the 21st century. The growth models adopted. As far away as it may seem, India can wait patiently because they've already been waiting for so long. Following the effects of colonization and several financial crises in the centuries to come, India suffered a catastrophic slump from actually being the world's largest economy back in the 1700s to struggling to make a semblance of an impact in the global economy towards the end of the 20th century. By 1993, India only accounted for about 1% of the global economy due to a financial crisis. However, thanks to the previously mentioned economic reforms, India's contribution to the global economy has now grown to about 3.6%, a level of contribution that's similar to China's contribution back in 2000. As India's contribution grows, so does its influence. For example, its national stock market is dwarfed only by the United States of America, China, and Japan, making it the country with the 4th largest stock exchange. Furthermore, its annual exports when compared to its GDP is currently experiencing a peak as it grew by an impressive 73% in the last decade alone. This has resulted in the increase of India's share of the global exports from 1.9% in 2012 to 2.4% in 2022. One interesting factor that may also have contributed to this growth is that India has managed to run a domestic demand-driven economy, which is a stark contrast to many other export-driven economies in Asia. This domestic demand-driven economy is represented in the fact that domestic consumption takes up about 55 to 60% of the nation's overall economy. This can be seen as an interesting factoid because back in the 60s, the US had population demographics similar to what India is experiencing today. These population demographics also have similarities with that of China's back in the turn of the 21st century. The importance in the contrast between China's export-driven economy and India's domestic demand-driven economy is that although China's economic growth model, which is dependent on exports and investment, allowed it to enjoy a remarkable annual growth rate of 10.5% per annum within a decade between 2001 and 2010, experts have shown their concerns about how sustainable this model may be in the long run. When you think about it, it isn't too difficult to see why. If you imagine a world where we finally develop the technology to finally transition from the global reliance on fossil fuels to perhaps green energy, those countries that had economies that were over-reliant in the oil and gas trade will be squirming for solutions. That is why countries like Saudi Arabia are hastily making attempts to diversify their economy by making it a tourist destination where one could also find a robust tech hub. In a domestic demand-driven economy, consumers' decisions and preferences in regards to the products they spend their money on has proven to keep the economy going. Not only does it seem to keep the market satisfied, it also determines the types of goods available and the quantity of goods that would be produced. As these goods and services remain in production, an amazing side effect that occurs is that this can lead to the generation of employment opportunities. For those looking for a working model, they can look at the US, in which consumption has established itself as a dominant force in the US economy since the 70s. Today, it makes up almost 70% of America's GDP in 2023. Some even speculate that this might be the reason that the US has been able to avoid a recession today as its consumers continue to spend. As such, one can see how India's economy has a lot of potential, as it is believed that this system may trigger a major transformation in India's economy that may result in great growth in the nation's income levels. Pattern of growth. With any luck, India may be able to make the most of its new growth pattern, the development of a single national market. In this single national market, India will be hoping its firms and its consumers will take advantage of its modern financial market and its booming service sector. Right now, India is experiencing an evolution in its financial sector. In the last few decades, banks, especially the public sector banks, have been the dominant forces. However, a transition is occurring in which private sector banks and non-banking financial companies are steadily grabbing their share of the market today. As its financial sector is developing, India has also experienced a lot of development and improvements in its transport sector. Within the last decade, India has succeeded in increasing the length of its road network by about 25%, which saw the addition of 10,000 kilometers of highway every year of the decade. This transportation development extended to its aviation section, as several world-class airports were open to the world within that time as well. That being said, it isn't all glory for India, as since the financial crisis occurred, India has experienced a drop in the overall investment share of GDP, despite this increased investment in transport infrastructure. Some may speculate and blame this on a lack of confidence in how the Indian economy is being managed, as reports show that both consumer and business confidence fell during the financial crisis. However, as time goes by, improvements in the economy and in the confidence shown in it have been achieved. Digitization. One can see these improvements when they take a look at India's progress in terms of implementing its digital payment system. Thanks to the adoption of the Unified Payments Interface, UPI, a platform which gives Indians the ability to make free and fast account-to-account transfers, India is standing out as one of the most advanced countries when it comes to the digitalization of its financial sector. In 2022 alone, it processed more than $1 trillion in transactions, a figure that represents a third of India's GDP. Learning this, it makes sense that India's digital growth and adoption is ranked as the second fastest among the 17 of the major digital economies. Second to only Indonesia, India has achieved faster digitization than many advanced countries in recent times. However, there is still a lot of work to be done, because when looked at holistically, India is still bottom of this list of the most digitized economies. As such, India has a lot of room for improvement, and this is being grasped with both hands. This is because the benefits of digital infrastructure and the role it plays in emerging economies cannot be ignored. According to experts like the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, these digital economies have great potential for inclusion, which could lead to the sustainable growth of a nation's economy because everybody will be involved. The implementation of a digital economy will get these people involved because the access will make life easier for consumers, which increases the potential of their productivity and their jobs, which in turn would give their government the confidence to market their services to those who need them within and outside their borders. Perhaps this is why India's GDP has grown by a factor of 78% in the last 10 years, with its service sector dominating about 48% of this growth. This may be because India's reliance on services is quite high for a developing country, so much so that it makes up about 40% of its exports, thereby making it the 7th largest exporter of services in the world. This is because India is a prime destination for companies looking to outsource services such as software development, customer service, and business process outsourcing. However, there is a bit of a problem here in that although the IT service industry is accountable for about $200 billion in export revenues, only about 5 million of India's 900 million working population work in this industry. In fact, India may have a bit of an employment problem, because only half of the 900 million working-age people are currently in the workforce, while only about 60 million have formal jobs. As such, many believe that the solution to this lack of jobs is to focus on the generation of more blue-collar jobs by focusing on manufacturing. This is probably why India is currently trying to make themselves available to the global manufacturing market. However, the challenge is that India has not been recognized as a manufacturing hub for many years now. Although they are enjoying some success in certain manufacturing segments, like the export of pharmaceuticals, electrical machinery, and vehicles, the Indian government is driven to achieve some improvement in these figures. That is why it embarked on the Make in India program, so that it could create and encourage companies to develop, manufacture, and assemble products made in India, and incentivize dedicated investments into manufacturing. However, India has been wary of leaning too much into this export-oriented approach. Instead, it is increasingly adopting protectionist measures that shield domestic industries and conglomerates from global competition. Unfortunately, this is hindering India's potential in the global goods export market. Regardless of these handicapping moves, India will still have time to exploit opportunities to invest in value-creating businesses. With any hope, these major investment opportunities will be taken by those who would not exploit the situation to create a monopoly. Right now, India is happy with the investment of some of its major companies like Tata and Adani, especially thanks to their high investment rates, which aid India's economic growth. So it's unforeseeable that it may deter these companies from making further investments. Let's just hope they'd be able to keep them in control. At least for now, India's economic growth is reflected in the growth of its physical capital, which in turn supports production, which involves things like infrastructure and real estate. With these in mind, India must make sure that these developments also reflect the improvement of its human capital. After all, some would agree that your human capital is the most important factor in developing the economy, and with India looking to overtake China as the world's most populated country, India must make sure that it doesn't collapse under the weight of its massive population. Right now, India's massive young population is poised to take advantage of a great situation for India as China's population grows older as the years go by. With over 500 million people under the age of 20 in India, China may just be ready to give up most of its market share in the global economy in the foreseeable future. However, before that can happen, India must do something about the fact that a large portion of its population are enduring poor education systems. As you can imagine, this is the potential of creating a large unskilled population in the future. That is why it is damning to hear that India only allocated about 2.9% of its GDP to education in 2022. A number that actually represents a bit of a rise in the decade or so. If India does not upgrade the education of its people, it may have a more daunting task than creating job opportunities for them in the future. To which, even right now, it appears as though they are even failing to create these jobs, as the unemployment rate in India is currently at about 7 to 8%, thereby making it one of India's significant challenges. With any luck, as companies look to diversify their investment beyond China, India with its young and large population may be the ones to make the most of these new investments. Hopefully, India will invest more in its education system just like it did with its infrastructure. That way, when it's time to exploit these future opportunities, India will be able to take with both hands. That is the only way India will ever overtake China. With any luck, it may be able to overcome its challenges so that it can become the largest economy in all of Asia. With that, this video has come to an end. As India overcomes its challenges, do you think Canada can overcome its crumbling economy? Click on this video to find out why Canada's economy is crumbling. Also, click here to see why are some African economies growing but some are failing. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Until next time, goodbye.